cellular transportation. Okay, so I like, Sky and Jessica know this, I like this little chart. Makes things so much easier for me. So we have passive and active. Active. Passive, no energy. Active, energy. Now, if I were to have a hill like this, and I would put a rock right here, would I have to do anything, use any energy to get that rock to roll down the hill? No, it goes naturally, right? If I had a rock down here and I wanted to go up the hill, I'd have to push it. I'd have to expend some energy to get it to go that way. So we have our high and our low. So we know if it's not using any energy, it's always going high to low. If it needs energy, it's always going low to high. Okay. So we have diffusion, actually simple diffusion. You might say just written as diffusion, but I like that and it's simple. It helps me visualize what it is. So, we have our cell. We have a lot of stuff on the outside. Simple diffusion, it's as simple as it possibly can be. It goes straight through the membrane. It's just, boom, going in from high to low. So we have our high, low. It's just going straight through the membrane. The only stuff that can do this is small and uncharged, and you do need to remember that. Because he will ask questions where he won't tell you, if it's simple diffusion or facilitated. He will say, oh, it's a small and uncharged particle, or give you an example of one. So, it goes from high to low, just straight through the membrane, doesn't need any help. It's easy enough. The next one, facilitated diffusion. When something's facilitated, it means it's being helped. And like a facilitator is helping something. So this diffusion needs help. So we have our cell. We have lots of stuff on the outside. Let's say we have a few stuff on the inside, so high, low. Now this stuff is big and charged. Example of this would be glucose. So you might ask a question, you might say, you have a high amount of glucose on the outside of a cell and a low amount of glucose on the inside. The glucose is going into the cell. What type of transport is this? You'd have to remember, glucose, that's a big molecule. That's going to be facilitated. Because these big molecules need help. They need these little protein channels to go through. Now, if we were talking about a dam, like with water, water naturally wants to go that way, right? It naturally wants to go to the low end, but it can't because that dam's there. If I were to poke a hole in it, water immediately start rushing out. It's the same concept. It naturally wants to go that way, it just can't. It needs a place, that protein channel to go through. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Does simple diffusion use the protein channel?
No.
Okay.
So that's the big difference. Simple diffusion doesn't need any help, it just goes through the membrane. And we have osmosis. The difference between these two groups, this is dealing with solutes, this is dealing with water. So, if we had a cup of water, we put a cell in it, and this water is 90%. I'm gonna get a tricky one for Jessica because she knows this stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna say the solution is 90% water and the cell is 30% solute. Which way is the water gonna go, Jessica?
So the solution's 90% water. Sorry, I had to think about this in my head again.
No, you're fine.
And it gets bigger. No, it gets smaller because it wants to go to the water.
Which way
right?
is it gonna go?
Oh, it goes
Wait.
from the water into the cell.
Perfect. Why?
Because there's more water on the outside of the cell, and it wants to go to where there's more water. So the
Water
cell
solid.
shrinks up.
More
It want,
soluble.
yep, exactly. It wants to go to where you had it right. It wants to go to where it's more solute, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
The
meant.
cell will get bigger, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because if we have these percentages, water always wants to even out the percentages, so it always goes to where there's more
That's what I
solute.
meant to say, not.
And
not
so
water.
if I gave you a word problem or like multiple choice problem, he might phrase it where he might give you like a percentage of the solute of water and then the percentage of this and percentage of water in the cell or something like that. Just because he won't give you the same number because he wants to trick you. Brother Ray likes to trick. I'm going to tell you that right off the bat. He likes to make questions difficult because he wants to test your knowledge. So just be ready, be aware, read things carefully. So, like you said, the water's rushing into the cell. What is that called? What type of solution?
Ionic, hyper. No, hypo.
Perfect. Hypotonic. My trick, like Jessica was saying earlier, my trick for this, when water's rushing into the cell, it gets really big and fat. I think of a hippo, hippos are big fat animals, so the cell's getting big and fat. So when the cell is swelling up with water, it's a hypotonic solution. Now when the cell's shrinking, it's a hypertonic solution, meaning all the water is leaving the cell, and that's causing it to shrivel up and to die. I'd like to think of this hyper. I think of little kids. Cell's getting really little. So hypertonic, really, really little cell. And the last one is isotonic, and that's when everything's just staying the same. Just there's no difference. So the water just stays the same. Nothing moves. We're all good.
I said it shrink, but I didn't mean that. I confused myself.
Yes.
I
Okay.
wasn't paying attention.
So on the active side, we have active transport. So let's say we have a cell. Actually, I'm going to. So we have a high amount on the inside, low amount on the outside. We want to get the stuff into the cell. Well, we're going to have to use something. So if I had my dam, and I wanted to get this water over here, what would I do? What would you guys do?
Use a pump.
Use a pump, exactly. So you use a pump, and the same thing in this. You have to use a protein pump. So a protein pump that uses energy to pump this stuff across because it's pumping it against the way it wants to go. It wants to go from high to low, but you're wanting it to go from low to high. You have to use energy to pump it from low to high. Same idea with the dam. You'd have to pump the water against where it wants to naturally go from low to high. Makes sense? Perfect. Okay. The last two. Okay, we have endo and exocytosis. Okay, if we're going this direction, it's endocytosis. This little thing right here, it's called a vesicle. It's a little bubble that's a membrane with stuff inside. It's a little membrane bubble with stuff. It's called a vesicle. And when it comes and it hits this cell, it opens up and merges with the cell. It's kind of like if you actually seen two bubbles, they meet, they make a bigger bubble. Same concept. This vesicle comes, hits the cell, merges with the cell membrane, and releasing the stuff in the inside of the cell. Now, if we go this way, that's exocytosis. Stuff comes to the edge of the cell membrane starts to fold and pinches off, creates this little vesicle or bubble, and that goes somewhere else. So, a lot of students remember the trick. Endo, N for in to the cell, exo for exit out of the cell. Now, the warning I have with this side of the board, students remember this trick, they go, okay, endo, into the cell, exo, out of the cell. If I were to say, glucose is being transported into the cell from a low amount outside and a high amount inside, what type of cellular transport is it? What would you guys say? Active. Why?
Because it doesn't have a vessel.
Vesicle.
Or vesicle, whatever.
Yeah,
it's called.
exactly. This is the word I want you guys to look for when it comes to these two. That if it says something about pinching off the membrane, something about vesicle, something about membrane bubble, I don't know, something it has to deal with this little bubble vesicle. It has to be one of these two. Too often I see students thinking, oh, it's saying it's going into the cell. I remember the trick, endo, for into the cell. And so they put this down. It's like, no, that's not necessarily right because active transport can go in or out of the cell. It doesn't matter. If it needs a protein pump, you're at active transport. If it needs a vesicle, you're down here. So, if I was taking a test and the question's just going over my head and I'm like, I have no idea what the answer is, I'd break it down. I'd first go, are we going from high to low or low to high? And, the question will phrase in a way where you'll be able to figure that out. Once you figure that out, let's say you're going high to low, you immediately go, my answer's not on this side. My answer's somewhere right here. So if A is active transport, I can immediately cross out A and B like that's wrong. Okay, so we're over here, and it's dealing with solutes, so we know it's not an osmosis problem. We can cross that out. And then it's saying it's glucose. I remember that's a big molecule. Or it's something small, uncharged, so it's simple. So that's the keywords to look for. If you can learn the keywords with the different types of transport and what side they fall in, passive or active, then even if a question's just going right over your head, you should be able to break down the question to be able to figure it out.
So he'll always use like at least one keyword from each.
He would have to.
Yeah.
For a problem, he would have to say, it's going from low to high or high to low. That's something he has to specify.
Yeah.
He has to. Then over here, he could say something like I said, you have a low amount of glucose on the outside of the cell and a high amount of glucose inside. You want to move the glucose is traveling into the cell. What type of transport is that? And you go, okay, that's active because there's nothing about membrane or the vesicle or anything.
Okay.
Even though I guarantee that would be an option. I guarantee if he asks a question like that, he'd put this because he knows students like to go to these.
Wait, can you repeat that question that you just said?
So, you have a low amount of glucose outside the cell,
Oh,
a
and
high
a high amount
inside, and you want to move, or the glucose is traveling from outside into the cell.
Okay, got it.
So you're going from low to high.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Any questions about transportation? Good? Perfect.